Rope. Cavers and climbers depend on it for our very lives. But unfortunately, rope can go bad. I mean, it can go really, really bad.
Hey guys, welcome to Carnivore Expeditions. I'm going to do a little bit different kind of a video today. I want to share with you an incident we had in a North Alabama cave about 2 weeks ago where one member of our team almost fell 70 feet, which of course would have resulted in death or at least a life-altering injury. To give you a little bit of background information, this is the entrance to the cave. This cave is located in Jackson County, Alabama, on the Skyline Wildlife Management Area. The entrance is horizontal, and you have to go behind this waterfall to get into the cave. We first visited this cave in early 2023. We wanted to do a scouting trip to see if this was a cave which we were interested in surveying. The original explorers of this cave reported that it was 1,000 feet long, but they did not do a survey or produce a map. On our first day, which was just a scouting trip, we didn't go down any of the side passages, although they were very enticing. We stuck to the main route of the cave, and after about 600 to 800 feet, we popped out into a big chamber room. This big chamber room had about 80 to 90 foot ceilings. At one end was a 70-foot waterfall, and on the other end, there was a high lead and a window way up high. The waterfall looked like it had going passage above it. One of the first things that we determined was that we needed to bolt this waterfall to see what was at the top, because there was obvious going passage at the top of this waterfall. We knew after this initial scouting trip that this was a cave we definitely wanted to survey. I came back about 3 weeks later with my friend Rachel, who is an expert boat climber. She was able to make short work out of this boat climb of about 70 feet. Rachel bolted up this 70-foot wall in about 3 hours. It would have taken me at least 2 different trips to do this same climb. We were blown away by what we found at the top. This is definitely the most decorated area of the cave. We didn't scoop very far, but I was very happy to have that waterfall hard rigged so that I could come back in a year or two when we actually surveyed this far back in the cave. I knew the WMA gates were about to close, and I wouldn't be back here for a year or so. I have other projects that I needed to finish up before coming back to this one. This is how we left it hard rigged. There are 2 stainless steel 1/2-inch bolts. One is up high, and then another one is down lower. I used 10mm static pit rope. The rope does not touch the wall at any point. It's a free drop all the way down, approximately 70 feet.
All right, on rappel.
On rappel.
Off rope!
Over the next 2 years, we made about 5 different survey trips into the cave as we were slowly but surely surveying our way back to the waterfall room. We decided to do another boat climb in the same room as the big waterfall, but on the opposite side. I'm not as fast of a climber as Rachel, so I knew it would take me multiple trips to make it to the top of this 60-foot pitch. Because it would take me multiple trips to climb up this route, we would be leaving some rope in the cave. Little did we know that this extra rope left in the cave would turn out to be a lifesaver on the day of our incident.
We're going to leave the rope there, and we're going to pick up next time we come in here.
About 2 weeks before our near-fatal accident, we were in the cave doing some survey work. My buddy Shane wanted to climb up the waterfall rope to see the pretty formation area at the top. He wasn't for sure he was going to be able to make the next survey trip. I spoke with Shane after the incident, and he reported the rope was just fine when he climbed it 2 weeks before. He said there were no bad spots on the rope. Here is some video from the day of the incident. when Brandon is safely back down on the floor after he had been climbing this rope. When he was 50 feet off the ground, he came across this bad spot on the rope. It's absolutely terrifying to think that his full body weight was hanging underneath this bad spot on the rope when he was about 60 feet off the floor. This rope was perfectly fine 2 weeks ago. What do you think happened during that 14-day period? My team and I have been talking about this incident for the past couple of weeks. This is probably the closest that any of us have ever come to death or a serious injury when climbing or rappelling rope in a cave. And all of us have been doing this for nearly 20 years. And this is the first time we ever had a near-death experience because we're always about safety, 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 safety. You know, when you come to a hard-rigged rope in a cave, if you're rappelling down into a pit, in other words, if the rope is hard rigged from the top, it's very easy to do a safety inspection. You can look at the hangers, you can look at the bolts, you can actually pull the rope up out of the pit and inspect it before you toss it back down before you rappel. But it's very different when you come to a hard rigged rope that's going up into a pit or up to a dome or up in a climb, because you have to get on it from the bottom. You can only see and inspect about the first 15 feet of the rope. And that's what happened to Brandon on this day. He came to the rope which we had hard rigged in the cave. This is a rope which we had climbed multiple times. As a matter of fact, one of our team members had just climbed this rope about 2 weeks before this incident, and he said the rope looked fine. He said he didn't see any problems with the rope. So whatever happened with this rope happened within a 2-week period. Anyway, Brandon was climbing up this rope, and when he was about 50 or 60 feet off the floor, he had about 10 feet to go, he came upon the spot in the rope that was just completely core shot. This rope was so bad that he was actually only hanging on rope by a few strands, and he quickly climbed up above the bad spot, and he made it off rope. He was standing at the top of the waterfall. He was trying to communicate to us what had happened. It was hard to hear because the roar of the waterfall, we couldn't exactly discern what he was trying to say. We eventually figured out that something was wrong with the rope. At that point, we were kind of like, what are we going to do? Brandon can't come back down that rope, and it's a long way to leave the cave. There's no phone service outside the cave. We would have to leave the cave, do about a 30-minute to hour walk to get back to our vehicles, drive down the mountain to get some kind of phone service, and then try to get in contact with another caver in the area who had a rope. But very fortunately, we had another bolt climbing project in the cave. On the opposite side of this big chamber, we had also been doing another bolt climb in which we were about 40 feet off the floor, and we had a rope which was left on that climb, and the rope was about 100 feet long. So what we decided, fortunately, is that we could pull down this other rope which was on another bolt climb and take it to Brandon. So that's what we did. We pulled down this other rope which we were using on a boat climb. We took it across the room, and we tied this other rope to the bottom of the bad rope. Brandon was able to pull up the good rope to the top of the waterfall, and he was able to re-rig the pit with this good rope, and we could discard the bad rope. So this incident, it had a positive outcome. No one was hurt. No one was stranded in the cave for hours and hours and hours because fortunately we had an extra rope. Here's some more footage of the bad rope, and wow, it's just scary just to look at that and just to consider that we were hanging on this, we were trusting this with our lives, and we're still trying to determine how this rope is nearly cut in half. We know it wasn't a rat because it's too far down the pit for a rat to chew it, and it wasn't rubbing anywhere on the walls. To go over some key points This rope is 10 millimeter static pit rope. It's made by a trusted manufacturer that has been in business for decades. The rope was not directly in the waterfall. When we did the initial boat climb, we were able to set the boats about 4 feet away from the waterfall. Therefore, this rope was not hanging directly down in the waterfall. It also was over to the side of the waterfall to where it wasn't getting sand and debris and things like that coming downstream over the waterfall. And plus, each time we used the rope, we always tied it off as far to the side as possible just to isolate it even farther from the waterfall. Probably the thing that puzzles us most about this incident is we had a team member who had just climbed this rope 2 weeks before the incident. In other words, 2 weeks ago, the rope was fine. Shane went up the rope. He explored the upper passage a little bit. He rappelled back down. He didn't notice there were any bad spots in the rope whatsoever. Something happened in that 2-week period. I don't know if perhaps a rock was blown over the waterfall and it nicked the rope. There were a couple of thunderstorms that happened during that 2-week period, but this rope had been in the cave for 3 years, and there have been numerous storms during that 3-year period. The rope, like I said, is not directly in the path of the waterfall. It's about 4 feet to the side of the waterfall, and we always pulled the rope over to the side as far as possible when we were leaving the cave. So it's very puzzling what happened to this rope. What could be done to prevent this type of incident from reoccurring in the future? Some thoughts that we've had is that maybe when you're doing this type of hard rigging, when you're hard rigging from the top and you always have to climb up from the bottom, one thing that we considered was maybe having 2 ropes. This is very common when it comes to industrial rope work. There are always 2 ropes hanging down so that when you're climbing on one rope, and then you have a safety rope beside of you where your weight's on one rope and maybe you have one ascender on this parallel rope. That's a lot of rope, that's a lot of extra work, and considering this is the type of incident that hopefully only happens once in a lifetime, maybe that's overkill. Or maybe you have a better solution. If you have a good idea about how this type of thing can be prevented from happening again, please leave a comment below. We would love to hear what your thoughts are, and who knows, maybe you may share something which may help someone stay safe or help us stay safe. Guys, thank you for watching. I'm going to put some links up on the screen to some other great cave project videos which I think you're going to love. Have a blessed day.